Krishna, 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 Everyone together. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. One more time, a little louder, a little more devotion. Hare Swami ki jai, Gopemanandi Hare. There that we don't want to drop the potatoes.
I will be walking around with this potato for like at least 10 days. All those who like potatoes, make sure we're raising your hands. I'll distribute some with you, no problem.
So, we recognize that one of the benefits, we recognize from the last exercise that one of the benefits we receive by holding on to resentment is that we get to be right. And the need to be right goes very deep within the heart of every conditioned soul, because it's connected to false ego. So Maharaj, would you like to tell the story about the scissors, the two men, the scissors and the, what is it, the rock and the scissors? Or what? So there's a story, I'm just going to read it because it's from a conversation. Two men were arguing. Prabhupada, yes, scissor logic. Because in Bengali they have stories and each one represents a kind of logic, so he called it scissor logic. One man said a knife was used. Yes. Satsarup Maharaj. And the other said no, it was a scissor that was used. And they began arguing back and forth, and finally one man who held that it was a knife, he threw the other man in the river. Prabhupada. That you accept that it is done by scissor. So he said, no, I won't tolerate. Then he pushed him in the water. Then he was doing like this. He got pushed in the water and all you could see was his hand. He was arguing while he was being drowned. No, I won't admit I'm wrong. Bhagavat says, argumentum baculum, Prabhupada. That was used. He was put in the water. Either you accept or I shall push you in the water. No, I'll not accept. So these rascals are like that. They are failure. They cannot do anything. Still, they do like this, so-called scientists. So, we're going to do a little exercise here, which is going to be very interesting for you. And it's going to help you understand something more about the need to be right, and more how it's connected to the false ego, and not connected to actually being right. That's irrelevant. So everyone make sure you have a partner. If you don't have a partner or your partner's not here, then you'll have to find another partner, but everyone will need a partner. And when you find everyone out there in YouTube land or Trinidad and Tobago Today land or whatever land you're in, somewhere out there, find a partner. You'll like this exercise. Just go grab somebody in your house If you can't find anybody, then you'll have to do this with an invisible partner. You'll pretend somebody's there. But this exercise really won't work so well with an invisible partner. You need a real one. Okay. Does anybody not have a partner? Raise your hand. If you don't have a partner, raise your hand. And what you want to do is turn your chair so you're facing your partner. So please your face. You're going to be having an argument with your partner. So make sure you can face them well. Okay. Anybody not have a partner? Okay. Turn around and your partner's behind you. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. You may have to help me demonstrate this. This is your assignment. Please listen carefully. Get into it. Tell them you're right. Don't stop. Get into it. Get into it. Tell them. Tell them. Okay. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, you had a great argument. I saw all of you arguing very nicely. Of course, you didn't know what you were right about, but that doesn't matter at all. The most important thing is that you're right. Right? Correct? Isn't it? Doesn't matter if you're actually right or not. It's just important that the other person gets it that you're right. So how many of you experienced something with that exercise a little interesting about your need to be right? Anyone experience?
Yeah, I want to know what my right twin. My twin.
No.
The experience I want to know, I tell him about the armor, right? He tell me I'm right for what?
Doesn't matter. As long as you're right, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yes?
Once I was saying I'm right, I want to show more harder and harder that I'm right.
Yes, exactly. You are getting angry. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
He's getting angry and he doesn't even know what he's arguing about. Right? Amazing. Yeah, what else?
The energy of wanting to be lord over the next person was very predominant.
Wow, the energy of wanting to lord over. And you didn't even know what you were lording over. As long as you could lord over, it didn't matter, right?
It feels good to be right.
Even if you're wrong. Yes?
Again and again I'm saying I'm right, and I want him to
Admit it?
accept that I'm right.
And he wouldn't accept it because he's a rascal. He's a bona fide rascal. Interesting exercise, isn't it? So, sometimes it's very, very difficult to admit we've done something wrong, isn't it? And sometimes we hold on to resentment because we don't want to let it go, because then we no longer have the right to be right. Don't want to lose. Don't want to be in the second position. Just a little something to get you thinking about the need to be right. Now, you will see this need coming up in your life. Sometimes people have a fight and they get really into it, and after 5 minutes, they forget what they were fighting about. Has that ever happened to you? you get into a big fight and then you say, wait a minute, what are we arguing about? I forgot. Sometimes that actually happens. Especially about?
Husband and wife.
Oh yeah, right. You guys don't fight here, do you? Husbands and wives? Not in Guyana? Not allowed? I've seen also devotees, they're preaching to somebody and the person doesn't accept. And they get upset. And they get mad that he won't accept. Instead of just walking away and saying, okay, whatever. They just pound away. You ever seen that? You ever done that yourself? You just can't let the person go because they won't agree with you. So we have a strong need to be right, and it gets in the way when we're trying to be forgiving. And I think that was obvious from this exercise and from this little story. Now, if you go down to your paper, I'm not sure what page it's on because I don't have one, but the title is Forgiveness is a Choice. Maybe somebody could tell me what page that's on. Page 10? It's on page 10. 10. How do you say 10 in Guyanese? 10. Page 10. Thank you. No, not this one.
Not this one.
Page 10 of the
First paper.
the first paper, the long paper, the one that's stapled together. Oh, they're all stapled together. This one. Yeah. What's the name on the paper in the front? Prasad? Transformation through Forgiveness. Yeah, this paper. Page 10 of Transformation through Forgiveness. You can take it back. I have it on my computer. I just don't have the page numbers. Okay, we're going to read under the section, Forgiveness is a Choice. God's gift to you is choice. Your gift to yourself is to use it. In other words, we all have independence, right? We can fly from Trinidad to Guyana, we can take a film of the seminar. We can choose to not come to the seminar. We can forgive somebody, we cannot. We have the choice. If forgiveness were not a choice, Shastra and Srila Prabhupada would not and could not ask us to choose to forgive. The scripture cannot instruct you to do something that it's impossible for you to do, because it wouldn't be fair, right? Krishna can't say, your spiritual master can't say, Srila Prabhupada can't say, do something if it's impossible to do. So that means any instruction that we're given implies we have a choice to either we can do it or we can reject the instruction, but we're not helpless. Now, some of you I know feel when you're hurt, you have no choice but to feel hurt, right? You just feel hurt. And some of you feel resentful and you feel, I have no choice, this is how I feel, anybody would feel like me, right? It's not true. We have a choice how we respond to a situation. We do have a choice. We may not use the choice. We may react from the mode of ignorance, but we have a choice whether to react from the mode of ignorance, passion, goodness, or in a transcendental way. So let's read on. It's important to understand that holding on to resentment is a choice to not forgive. In other words, you are choosing to keep your resentment alive and well. If you stop nourishing your resentment, it will die of starvation. So we're thinking, something happened to me and I can't do anything about it. But actually we're keeping it alive. We're the ones keeping it alive. Here's a quote from the Bhagavatam. Every living entity has the freedom to be attracted by material nature or to stand as a hero and resist that attraction. It is simply a question of the living entity being attracted or not being attracted. There is no question of his being forced to come in contact with material energy. So here Prabhupada's saying, the whole reason we're here was a choice. We chose to come here. It wasn't an accident. A bad choice, but we chose. We've been choosing lifetime after lifetime to stay here. Another bad choice. But at any point we can choose to get out of here. Because Krishna has given us the freedom to do what? Choose. If he doesn't give us the freedom to choose, no fair. Can't love him, right? That's our philosophy. Let's read on. Does that make sense? Any questions? You are responsible for your feelings, and you can change the way you see, think, and feel about a situation. The behavior of another person or organization is not responsible for how you feel. The problem is not out there, it is in here. Somebody like to write that on the board? Our scribe, local scribe, someone with good writing? I bet one of the ladies has nice handwriting. Is that true? Who has good writing? You have good writing? On a separate piece of paper, you can write the following. The problem is not out there. The problem is not out there. You can all write this down. You can make a t-shirt too. It's another good t-shirt. The problem is not out there. It is in here. What does in here mean? Where is in here? Yeah. And now I'm going to explain what that means a little more. Let's get a little excited here. I'm going to walk around. Dattavara, you're going to have to move the camera around. Mahatma's getting excited now. Watch out, Mahatma's excited. Okay, I have a question for all of you. I know you're intelligent. Shouldn't be too difficult to answer this question. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Wow. 1 out of 1. I have another question for you. Seeds. You're getting the wrong oranges. Okay. Seeds come out also. That's true. Why does juice and seeds come out of an orange? This guy's a scientist. Pressure. If you put pressure on a rock, you won't get orange juice, will you? Well, it's not really only pressure. Why does juice come out of an orange?
Force.
Because that's what an orange is, right? That's what's inside the orange, right? When you squeeze an orange, juice comes out because that's what's inside. Similarly, when you're squeezed, what comes out of you? When we are squeezed, what comes out of us is
Anger.
inside of us, whatever it may be. No, not anger, because the sadhu who picked up the scorpion, what came out of him when he was squeezed? Compassion. What comes out of us? Write down when you're squeezed, what comes out of you? I mean, many things may come out of you. Some on a good day, compassion; on a bad day, anger. Before seminar. What comes out of you? Hopefully better things will come out of you later, yeah. when your husband gets mad at you, what comes out of you? You pay obeisance and say, honey, I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. Is that what comes out of you?
Funny words.
The kitchen knife comes out. A frying pan comes flying through the house. A rolling pin, yeah. Rolling pin. Maybe we should do a skit, huh? A day in the life of a Guyanese Grihasta. Bringing knives, rolling pins, pans. So, in this letter, remember I told you about this letter where this devotee wanted to take sannyas? And so Prabhupada sensed that he wasn't really feeling happy as a grihasta. And particularly, he was thinking, I can't become Krishna conscious in this situation. If I become a sannyasi, I can become Krishna conscious. So Prabhupada said, don't think like that. In one situation you'll be Krishna conscious, another situation you won't. He said, it doesn't depend on the situation, it depends on you. So in a similar way, somebody does something, says something, and then if we react with resentment or anger or envy or jealousy, that means it's a choice that we made to react that way, because that's still inside of us, but we tend to blame it on the person, and we think, well, there's nothing wrong with me. The reason I'm angry is because he did this. Like, I'm a sadhu. I don't get angry, but it only takes a person like this who will do something so horrible that I got angry. And therefore, my anger is justified, it's righteous, it's okay. That's a big illusion, isn't it? Now, in some cases, your anger could be justified if the person was attacking the temple or so on. But we're speaking in normal situations. In normal life, we have a very strong tendency to blame other people and other situations for how we react. Yes or no? Yes. So, in learning how to forgive, this is a very important thing to realize. We have a saying, I don't know if you have the saying here, but when you don't get along with somebody or somebody disturbs you, we have a saying. We say, this guy pushes my buttons. You have that saying here? He pushes my buttons, which means I become very intolerant, I become very upset, I may become angry. Right? When you're a sadhu, you have different buttons that people push than when you're not a sadhu. They pushed Thakur Haridas's buttons. Prahlad Maharaj's buttons were pushed. Ambarish Maharaj's buttons were pushed. Draupadi's buttons were pushed. They weren't red buttons like ours. You push our buttons, the fire department comes out at you. But those are blue buttons, compassion, kindness, and so many good qualities come out. So it's very important in being able to forgive, to understand the person is not the problem. The problem is where?
Inside. With you.
The problem is not out there, it is in there. And as long as we think it's out there, we're going to be in trouble, because there's a lot of problems out there, right? There's a lot of people who walk around with signs that say, I'm a problem for you. Isn't it? Lots of them. And some of them ended up in the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare movement. And now they're wearing dhoti tilak kurta sari. And you're thinking, this guy is not a devotee. So this is important. You want to say something about this? Okay. You had a question, somebody. No. Oh, yeah. So.
One question.
Yes.
I was just thinking that here we're talking about choice, that we do have a choice and choose whatever we want. But then sometimes we hear the philosophy being presented in such a way that under the control of material nature. We don't have a
Right,
choice.
right.
Whatever material nature, like we are just puppets. So how can we understand it?
Prabhu, why'd you run off with my wife? Oh, Prabhu, I was under the modes that day. It wasn't me. That damn mode of ignorance. It creates havoc, I would have never done that, unless I got caught. But even if you say, and you could make that argument a little bit, because shastrically there is some support for that. But then the next question is, how did you get in the mode of ignorance? Whose choice was that? You mean, at some point you say, okay, the modes did it, but at some point you ended up in those modes. It wasn't random. Okay, today, Prabhupada will be in goodness, Mahatma will be in passion, and Jitesh will be in ignorance. Tomorrow, Mahatma will be in ignorance, Prabhupada will be in goodness, Jitesh. It doesn't work like that. Seems like it works like that. Tell you a story. Very nice story. They're on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. And they said, Srila Prabhupada, so-and-so Prabhu, he's having difficulty following the regulative principles. Prabhupada said, but he promised. He said, no Prabhupada, he's very weak, but he's sincere. And Prabhupada said, why is he giving in to weakness? Choice. The devotees were trying to say, he's sincere, he's just weak, he's helpless, he can't do anything. What did Prabhupada say? No, he promised, he must do. So Prabhupada didn't say, damn, that mode of ignorance got another disciple again. I'm going back to India, this is too difficult. He told him right away, you can't do this, you promised. In other words, do what you said you were going to do. And then they tried to further his case. They were advocating. He said, no, Prabhupada, he's weak. Thinking, Prabhupada's going to say, well, if he's weak, then it's okay. And Prabhupada immediately shot back, why are you giving in to weakness? So, it's really a question of understanding what we control and what we don't control. But, it's interesting, this philosophy. I'm glad you brought it up because it's interesting. Because when we take initiation, we promise to follow 4 regulative principles, which must mean we have some control of whether or not we can follow them. And it must mean that it's not an automatic thing. I'll just vow to chant 16 rounds, because if you chant 16 rounds, everybody knows you automatically follow the principles. Would you tell that to your guru at initiation? No need to vow to follow the principles, because if you just chant 16 rounds, you'll remain transcendental. No, you wouldn't say that, but you must promise to follow those, which means throughout your life you make a conscious effort every day to commit yourself to these principles. And whenever a devotee couldn't follow, Prabhupada would say, but you promised. And the devotee would try to wiggle out. But I didn't know what I was doing. Things have changed. I'm not sure I really still want to be a devotee, whatever they would say. And Prabhupada would say, no, but you promised. A human being keeps their promise. An animal cannot keep their promise, but a human being does. So, when I was hurt by this sannyasi, when he left, I was very upset. And I didn't forgive him for 18 years. And I thought that upset was permanent. That I could do nothing about it. I would be upset for the rest of my life. I just accepted that there was nothing I could do. I was hurt by what he did. He just left, betrayed our trust in him, and that's the end of the story. That's how I felt. I got a hold of a book when I was developing this workshop. Right in the preface of the book, the author says, forgiveness is a choice. I put the book down and said, this is bogus. It's not a choice. I've been holding on to this for 18 years. There's nothing I can do about it. So then I began teaching. I had the opportunity to teach forgiveness with one devotee who's a counselor. So she has degrees in psychology. She understands how the mind and emotions work. And she made a statement which is very, very powerful. She said, forgiveness means to take responsibility for how you feel. You get angry. Do you have a right to get angry just because somebody upset you? Or could you be responsible enough to calm yourself down? Could you be responsible enough to respond, not with anger, but in some other way? You could, couldn't you? I mean, it doesn't feel like that when you get angry, right? It feels like I have no control. But the reality is, forgiveness means to take responsibility for how you feel. I feel like hurting this person. Should I do it? I think I'm a devotee. I shouldn't do it. I control my emotions. Now, something else very interesting happened to me once upon a time. I was staying at a devotee's house, and I was looking in his room. He had a bookshelf, he had books, and when I stay at someone's house, I look at the books that I don't have because I'm not going to steal their books, so I can read them while I'm there. Sometimes I feel like stealing them. Sometimes they get glued to my bag, and I come home and I find them there, but intentionally I don't do it. So he had a book. I'm so honest, aren't I? So he had a book which was interesting to me, written by a man named Scott Peck. And Scott Peck wrote a famous book called The Road Less Traveled, which I never read, but many people told me it was a good book about community and search and truth and so many things. And he had the book, The Road Less Traveled, sequel, or part 2 or something. So I opened the book up, and he says, we often find in adults that adults sometimes act like children. Have you ever noticed that? You ever notice adults acting like you? No. When you become an adult, you'll notice. I wanted that, and they get all, I wanted to do this. And your wife says, no, we're doing that. You're sulking, I'm not going. I'm not going to do that. So we often act like children, even though we're adults, or we get hurt. Where's so-and-so? He got hurt. He's not coming to the temple anymore. It's like a little kid goes in his room and the parents, come out and trying to make him happy. Get away. Don't talk to me. Right? I'm upset. I don't want to see you. Throw something at them. I'm not coming to the temple anymore. Sulking. We all do this, right? From time to time. We're adults. We have these big bodies. It says on our birth certificate, you're over 21. So you're not supposed to act like a baby anymore. But sometimes we act like babies. You ever notice that? You ever notice your behavior like a baby? So Scott Peck, he said something which I really appreciated. He said, no. It's not adults acting like children. He said, they never grew up. They never became adults. So if you think about it, there's a lot of truth in that. When we're holding a grudge, it's like we're a little kid, I'm not talking to my best friend anymore because he promised me this, but he didn't do it. True story. In Mauritius, the temple president and his wife lived in a very small house on the property. And for a year and a half, they didn't speak to one another. And the only way they could communicate is they would tell their son or daughter, tell your mother this, and the mother's right there. True story. I met them in Mayapur last year. They're talking now. I said, are you talking now? Looks like you are. They were very happy. So it was just amazing that we as adults sometimes may act in very childish ways. So if we look at resentment this way, we can see often we're not taking responsibility for how we feel about a situation, for how we're reacting or responding. We're just letting our emotions drive us. And sometimes those emotions are very immature. Have you noticed that? When we're arguing and one group is against another, and I'm not going to tell them, and I'm not going to talk to this one. And that's what kids do, don't they? Kids are good at that. So, how many of you want to grow up? how many of you are ready to grow up? It will really be helpful for the preaching of the Hare Krishna movement if we all grow up. You know, you see these videos in China, and they're having a parliament, and they're like punching one another in the face because this guy doesn't agree with this. You know, it's like, they do that in India also? Scream, yell, jump up and down, whatever. Yeah. Anyway. Yes?
Just one clarification, Mahatma. It seems to, whenever we describe the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and even in this exercise here, you're saying that it seems like you're describing two persons, two individuals. One that is making or deciding on the choice what we do, or what we decide to do, and another person that is executing or carrying out. Can you explain that a little bit?
Seems like you said there's two egos.
Like two individuals.
One's deciding and the other is...
Yeah.
And what's the other one doing?
Like executing the act.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because sometimes you decide but you don't execute. That's also there. Is that what you mean, or?
No,
But-
I mean to just explain a
Yeah.
little.
Well, I'll tell a story. It's a really nice story. I don't know if it exactly answers your question, but it'll begin to get us there. There was, in Los Angeles, during Srila Prabhupada's time, they brought all the artists of ISKCON and they moved to Los Angeles so they could produce the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because Prabhupada wanted it published in 2 months, all the 17 volumes. So they got every artist, they needed 17 volumes is a lot of paintings. And I think it used to take an artist like a month to do a painting, and they needed like 6 or 8 paintings for every book, and they're bringing 17. So every artist they could get, they brought. So they did all the paintings, and there are already artists there painting previously for the Bhagavatam. So there's paintings all over the LA temple. I didn't even know what to do with them. There wasn't enough walls. So Prabhupada's taking a tour of the temple, and they go into the deity kitchen. There's a painting on the floor, and you should never put Krishna on the floor, because the painting is not different, and it was on the floor. And Prabhupada said, "Who left that painting on the floor?" Now Prabhupada was with his servant. His servant did not live in Los Angeles. His servant is just traveling. So what do you think his servant said? No. He wasn't that good of a servant. The first thing he said was, "I don't know." And the second thing he said was, sometimes devotees say this, "It's not my responsibility." Same thing. Now, if you want a little good advice, don't ever tell your guru, "It's not my responsibility," unless you want to see a hurricane in front of you. He said that, and Prabhupada said, "It is to your responsibility." In other words, Prabhupada's pointing out we have this desire to just say, well, it's someone else's fault, it's someone else's problem. And then one time Prabhupada said, anytime you see a problem, you should think it's my fault. Like, you walk around the temple. Oh, why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Right? Instead of thinking, I should make it better. I don't know if that answers your question, but Maharaj will get me out of this mess.
Just another little similar story that in a morning walk in Mayapur, 76, Srila Prabhupada went out, everybody came behind, and then Srila Prabhupada stopped, everybody stopped, and Prabhupada gave a signal they should go, so nobody knew what to do. What are we supposed to do? And so, all the big sannyasis, everybody walked by, and then Srila Prabhupada pointed to a piece of paper on the ground, and he said, So you say you were Brahmanas, Shudra, Mlecha. No? And he said, indicating everybody walked by, nobody wanted to take the responsibility, nobody wanted to be, the person who, would have the right consciousness. Many times Srila Prabhupada did the same thing. With the cobwebs, he would point up to the fan or above the light, and because Prabhupada would say all kinds of philosophical things, so devotees were trying to make some philosophical, the light means that Krishna is present. Prabhupada said, no, bird is bird nest. No. Otherwise, who's managing here? So Srila Prabhupada was very, very keen on making sure that everybody accepted responsibility. I just wanted to say something about being right, because it's not that just because we're neophyte devotees or something like that we think, we're right. If I get to be a little higher stage of devotional service, then I'll always be right. Because Dhruva Maharaj, because his brother Uttama was killed by the Yakshas, so Dhruva Maharaj went to seek revenge and began to kill all the Yakshas, and they fought back, and he fought back, and they fought back. And it wasn't until Swayambhuva Manu came and told him, preached to him, and he's a pure devotee. And that's what Swayambhuva Manu said. You're a pure devotee. You should know better than this. So, point is that just like Parikshit Maharaj, just like Arjuna, we may say, the point we were making yesterday, they're pure devotees. But they are actually being put by the energy of the Supreme Lord into a situation to teach us. That it's not such an easy thing to give up. So the point is we have to always be vigilant. Always be vigilant. Because even, just like Bharat Maharaj, even at the point of Bhava Bhakti, he became attached to a deer. So all these lessons in the Bhagavatam are to teach us that you always have to be vigilant. And just one little point about the Prabhupada saying, you promised. So Arjuna, in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he asked Krishna, why is it that I do something sometimes, and I know I shouldn't do it, but I do it anyway. And then Krishna said, Rajaguna samudbhavaha, kamesha krodesha, lust and anger, and it's the mode of passion. And so Arjuna was starting to think, it's not my fault. No. And then Krishna kept saying that just as, a mirror is covered by dust, smoke is covered by fire, every living entity is covered by lust. Oh, great, I'm off the hook now. Arjuna was thinking like that. And then Krishna was speaking very philosophically, and then he said, so, from the very beginning, curb this enemy known as lust by regulating the senses. Arjuna, I've got to accept the responsibility. So sometimes we're always looking for an excuse, like we did this exercise. So even Arjuna with Krishna, but just as Srila Prabhupada made his disciples accept the responsibility of the promise, the vows at initiation. So Krishna is explaining to us all that we have to be responsible and take the responsibility for our actions. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Sometimes you make a decision and then you think in your mind, I'm not going to be able to do it. Like someone may say, okay, I want to forgive. But there may be something inside that's saying you can't do it. You're not going to be able to make the choice. Or there may be something that's more subtle. You don't realize what it is. And we're going to do an exercise to help us discover this. But just to give you a preview. For example, some people feel that they could forgive somebody who's not so close to them. But if they've been hurt by a family member, that's unforgivable. And they may have this belief, and they don't even know they have it. But they're trying to forgive a family member, and they're finding it difficult. So they made a decision, I'm going to forgive, but they can't do it. Simply because deep down inside, they believe that if a family member does something like was done to me, it's unforgivable. You cannot forgive. So that may be going on. There may be other beliefs we have about ourselves. I'm not able to do it, I'm not smart enough to do it, whatever it might be, that may be going around that's preventing us from doing what we decide to do. Some people will say, well, I'm just lazy, so I can't do it. Like, you just have this definition, I'm lazy. So that kind of gets you a good, that's your calling card, I'm lazy. So whenever there's a problem, you just throw that out. What's the problem? I'm lazy. So you're making decisions, but mode of ignorance is you can't go beyond the decision. That's.
Or if you're in the mode of passion, I'm busy.
Oh yeah, if you're in passion, you're too busy to do it. The time you get to goodness, you don't even care anymore. Or maybe you already are doing it in goodness. So there's complications which involve each individual's nature, psychology, personality, of why they may decide to do something and not do it. There's an interesting thing that people have discovered is that sometimes people don't do something because if they try to do it and they're not successful, they'll feel so bad they don't even try. Well, I'll try to forgive, but what if I don't? Then I'll be like, well, I'll be disappointing Mahatma, I'll be disappointing Maharaj, I'll be letting down my spiritual master and Prabhupada, but I'm not going to try. That's also possible. We are complicated creatures. But one thing I can say is that behind every action, there's a belief that created the action. So if you see yourself doing something, or you see yourself, anybody or any other person doing something, you could ask this question: what would someone have to believe to do this? Like you see a devotee, he's at the temple every morning at 4 o'clock. 365 days a year. Ask yourself, what would someone have to believe to be there every morning? And you begin to understand that sadhana is important, dedication to the Guru is important, my spiritual life is important. It starts to become obvious, right? There's a man, he leaves for work at 5:30 in the morning, he's got 3 kids, and he comes back 9:30 at night. Kids are sleeping. When he leaves, the kids are sleeping when he comes home. Saturday, he goes to work till 6. Sees the kids for a couple hours. Sunday he's exhausted, he sleeps half the day, spends an hour with his kids. So you ask yourself, what would a person have to believe to do that? And I think it's obvious. Family's not important, kids aren't important, money's important, business is important. So whenever you see an action in yourself or others, ask a question. What would someone have to believe? And in this case, you can ask, what would someone have to believe who decides to do something and doesn't do it? And you may come up with lack of confidence, fear, lazy. Many things may come up. Yes?
In such a situation, the kids will say, thy uncle come home.
Kids will say what?
Thy uncle. In other words, if the father is going to work when they're sleeping and coming back home when they're sleeping, and then on Saturday he just see the... So for a long period of time, they haven't known, this is my daddy. No, that uncle. Mommy, look, uncle come.
Oh, uncle. He's the uncle. Yeah. Anyway, that's a common example. So let's read a little more. You said, when you are squeezed, what comes out of you is what's inside of you. Your emotions don't hold on to you, although it may feel like they do. You see where we are? We're still on page 10, is that right? Middle of page 10. Your emotions don't hold on to you, although it may feel like they do. But you hold on to them. Thus you can voluntarily let go of emotions that are hurting you. This is the practice of emotional detachment. You know, like when somebody gets angry, you just say, let it go. Prabhu, just let it go, just drop it. So, Prabhupada gives the example of the man holding onto a tree while screaming, let me go, let me go, let me go. So we're actually holding on to the resentment, but it feels like it's holding on to us. So I can't let it go. Then Mahatma comes and says, it's a choice. And you say, it's not a choice, it's holding on to me, it's strangling me. The anger is killing me. I say, no, you can let it go. It's an emotion. Emotion is not something that's stuck to you. Feels like it is, but it's not, because they go away, right? You're not angry all the time. You're not happy all the time. You're not sad all the time. The emotions come and go. You can choose to practice forgiveness now, even if you don't feel like forgiving. Right action, even performed by force, fosters proper ways of thinking and feeling. Prabhupada said, if you don't feel like bowing down, bow down anyway, and then you will feel like bowing down. Okay, let's do a little example here. Everyone put their hands together in pranam, like this, and just hold it and just be conscious of how you feel right now, just by doing this. Okay, now I'd like you to go like this. Change your posture and go like this. Sit like this, with your feet out, and your head up. How do you feel? You guys look really puffed up. Before you looked like sadhus, now you look like jerks, basically. No offense, but put your sadhu body back together. So, sometimes just practicing a behavior can begin to alter your consciousness. So you hold your hands like this, even if you don't mean it, but you bow down, even if you don't feel like it. It begins to alter your consciousness. So we can, even if we're hurt, we can begin to practice forgiveness. We can begin to let go. Because just the practice of it will change how we think. It's interesting, isn't it? If you wait, however, if you wait to practice forgiveness until you feel like forgiving, you may be waiting your entire life or lifetimes. Now, some devotees will say, well, I don't feel like forgiving, so I'll wait till I feel like it. But you may never feel like it. And so then we go back to that definition. Take responsibility for how you feel. If you want to forgive, but you don't feel like it, take responsibility. You think that's possible? Think you can do that? You can try, right?
Some devotees say, since I'm not chanting purely, I won't chant. Until I can chant purely, I won't chant. So when are you ever going to chant purely? Never.
I'll take a bath when I become Krishna conscious. Cleanliness is next to godliness. When I become godly, I'll become clean. Till then, tough luck. So, through forgiveness, the events of your past will no longer dictate your future. This is because you are the one who decides how much the past affects you. You see, when you're not forgiving, you're allowing the past to affect you today, right? If I knocked you on the head, which I won't do, but if I did and you got amnesia, all of a sudden you couldn't remember all these horrible things this person did to you. And you'd be fine. Maybe we should just do that. That would be a lot faster. We could have finished this seminar in like 15 minutes. Just bang, 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 bang. I can't remember anything. I'm so happy. All my problems are gone with one bang in the head. So, something happened in the past, it's affecting us today, right? So, would you like to be able to decide to not have that affect you? Wouldn't that be good? You could decide. Well, you can. I've come to tell you that you can. Let's read this next quote. It's kind of nice. I like it. Losers live in the past. Winners learn from the past and act in the present to create a better future. This happened in the past. Okay. I'm not going to live in the past. I'm going to learn from it. And then I act in the present based on what I learned to create a better future. So don't live in the past, learn from the past. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If you live in the past, then you can't control your life now. Prabhu, how come this happened? Well, when I was 10, my mother wasn't nice to me. But you're 45 now. I know, but she wasn't nice to me when I was 10. That's why I'm always angry at everybody. Well, would you like to be nice to people? You can change that. You can. Okay. Now we're going into a more self-reflective part of the seminar. We made the point that the problem is not out there, it's where? In here. It's how we're responding. Somebody, just like your husband or your wife will not always do something that you would expect they would do or you would like them to do. But normally you can't control what they do. So what can you control is how you respond to what they do. So, now, in Krishna consciousness, when we see another person acting in a way which we don't approve of, I'll say when we're not in Krishna consciousness, what do? We blame them, right? Don't we? Or we find fault. Look what they did. That's kind of how most people act. But in Krishna consciousness, we don't do that, do we? Since we're all good devotees, what we do is, when we see someone that is acting in a way which we don't approve of, we think, I am worse. I have so many bad qualities. And we think, the quality that I'm seeing in this person that is upsetting me is only upsetting me because I have that quality myself. And even if we don't believe that, at least we think, better I work on myself than focus on someone else's faults. Unless you're the guru whose thankless task is to focus on the faults of your disciples. Which is why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, no Vaishnava can become a guru because Vaishnavas do not find fault. What to do? No gurus, no parampara, finished. So Bhaktisiddhanta said something amazing. Should I tell you what he said? This is amazing. This is so amazing. Sit tight in your chair. You might fall over once you hear it. Fasten your seatbelts, everyone. We're taking off. One disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was complaining about another devotee. Does that ever happen here? Maybe once every 10 years, one devotee might complain about somebody, right? Not more than that. It's kind of rare. But that one time you saw it happening, maybe you can relate to this story. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did not allow his disciples to complain and find fault. He would not hear it. He would have nothing to do with it. If they began to complain, he would stop them and he'd say, tell me something nice about this devotee. They would say something nice. He'd say, thank you. Finished. You can go now. He would never hear complaints. So this one disciple is complaining about another devotee. He stops him. He says, wait a minute. I have to tell you something. I am the guru. That means I have to find fault with my disciples. No Vaishnava ever wants to find fault because it goes against Vaishnava principles. Vaishnavas do not find fault. In case you didn't know, somebody should have told us that when we moved in the temple. They should have given us a t-shirt that says, Vaishnavas do not find fault. Actually, we should have a whole bunch of t-shirts. Each day will be that day for the t-shirt, and we'll all wear this. No complaints. Vaishnavas don't complain one day. Vaishnavas don't find fault. When you squeeze an orange, what comes out is what's inside. We have all these t-shirts for different days of the week. So he's explaining to this disciple, look, I am the Guru. I have the thankless task. It is a thankless task to find fault. No Vaishnava wants to find fault. I don't want to do it, but I have to. It's my job. It's distasteful. It's un-Vaishnava-like. And he didn't say exactly in these words, but I'll use the modern expression. And then he said, my God, why would you want to find fault with anybody when you don't have to? I have to, and I can't tolerate to do it, and you don't even have to, and you're doing it. What's wrong with you? Why would you want to do this? Isn't that interesting? Because he taught a Vaishnava does find fault with one person. Guess who that person is? Yourself. That's it. That's the only person he finds fault with. They should have told us that the day we joined the Bhakti program. I've been finding fault with everybody in ISKCON ever since I joined the Bhakti program because nobody told me you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to find fault with yourself. Why didn't they tell me when I became a Bhakti? It would have been so much easier, wouldn't it? What do you think of that story?
Great.
It's amazing. Okay, I want to read some quotes. They're in this book. Most of our suspicions of others are aroused by our knowledge of ourselves. What does that mean? That Prabhu is a cheater. I can tell. Look what he's doing. If you weren't a cheater, how would you know anybody has a cheating mentality? How could you understand unless you understand a cheater's mind? Prabhu, that brahmachari, he's lusting after that woman, I can tell. How would you know unless you know how to lust after a woman? How would you pick up on it? You have to have some experience, right? So he's saying most of our suspicions about others are aroused by knowledge of ourselves because we know. So whenever anybody's accusing somebody of being anything, watch out for the accuser because he may be worse than the person he's accusing. Always be suspicious of the accuser. Just some advice. Unless he's the guru finding fault, it's a service or the temple president, that's a different thing. What you say about others says more about you than it does about them. What does that mean? We tend to see our own faults in other people. So when we're pointing out a fault, when you're pointing out a fault in another person, you might want to think, turn it around and point that same fault out in yourself. What you say about others says more about you than them. Or what it also says, very interesting thought, it also says more about your need to find fault than their fault. Isn't that interesting? What you say about others, what does it say about you when you're finding fault with others? It says you have a need to find fault. That's what it says. We have to be introspective to see that. Otherwise, we're always going to be pointing the finger at somebody else. And we're going to have an organization where everybody's blaming everybody else. When Prabhupada, the founder of Acharya, said, whenever there's a problem, you think it's my problem. It's my responsibility. It's my fault. Let me fix it. Interesting story. There was a lady whose husband sold their house, divorced her, and he was a co-signer on the bank account and took all the money. So she was telling this story about how bad he was, right? And so the counselor said, okay, now I want you to explain why that whole thing is your fault. My fault? He sold the house, took the money, divorced me, went to the bank, signed the check, took all the money out, and he's gone. He's a bum. B-U-M. bum. The counselor said, okay, you were hurt, you were exploited, but I would like you to explain why it's your fault. Just for the sake of the exercise. She's going around in her mind thinking, going around thinking, I never should have married that bum in the first place. I was stupid. It's my fault. Interesting, isn't it? That how you could take responsibility for something that bad, to realize I was dumb enough to marry a bum. This is what happened. It's not his fault, it's my fault. You see, it's a different way of thinking because we're going to see things from a different perspective. I always tell my wife, you're so intelligent, you're so smart, look who you married. Same principle, right? You ended up with me because you're like so smart. You know, you made such a good choice. She's watching now. She's very happy. Okay, let's read another quote. The next one. If you hate a person, you hate something in him that is part of yourself. What isn't a part of ourselves doesn't disturb us. Have you ever seen a devotee chanting japa, totally spaced out? You know, his mouth is moving, but his mind is out in some other universe. His heart is somewhere, and every 4 beats he's talking and this. You ever seen that? Does that happen in Guyana? Or only in the Alachua? So, and you're seeing it, it's just bothering you. You ever seen it? It's just bothering you. You just want to go up to this devotee and go, Rabu, that's not japa. I'm going to kill you if you don't chant japa. Why would that? And then another devotee, he's just chanting his rounds and he's absorbed. It doesn't bother him. He's Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. The other person's whatever, talking, you know, about anything and everything, and he's just chanting. Why does it bother one person and not another? Because the person it bothers does the same thing. That's why it bothers him. Isn't it? Of course, you may have a genuine concern and it bothers you in a transcendental way. But often, when you see something in others and it really bothers you, it's because you do it yourself and you don't want to admit it. Otherwise, it wouldn't bother you. And that's what he's saying. It's only imperfection that complains about what's imperfect. Once a devotee was complaining about book distribution, the way devotees distribute books, because some devotees, the way they distribute books, he didn't feel it was so nice. He felt like the devotee could have been more genuine, it could have been nicer, he could have preached more, but he was a little rough. He wasn't preaching that much, he was just trying to get the money, whatever. You know what Prabhupada said? He said, so, you show them how to do it better. Prabhupada never said, yeah, I know, these disciples, they're so bad. I don't know, I'm going back to India, I give up. He didn't say that. He said, you show better. He never condoned this kind of thing. He said, well, just show it better. You don't like how this is done? Do it better. One disciple was complaining about the behavior of another. Prabhupada said, so you show by your behavior how to behave. It's a lot easier just to go, Prabhu, you're this and you're that. That's easy. Anybody can do it, right? Comes natural. Even the little kids do that. But to take a different approach, to see in improving ourselves, to set a better example, that's not so easy, is it? It's easier just to complain, right? So we should have a program. Everybody get a rubber band, stick it on their wrist, and every time you complain, go like this. And after a while, your wrist will hurt so much that you'll never want to complain again. At least you'll torture yourself instead of torturing everybody else. Anyway, so let's read the last quote. This is from Bhaktisiddhanta. When faults in others misguide and delude you, have patience. Introspect and find faults in yourself. Know that others cannot harm you unless you harm yourself. What is he saying? He's saying focusing on others' faults harms you. Sometimes we read in Shastra that when you focus on another person's fault, you get that fault. We read in Shastra, when you criticize, you give the person you're criticizing your pious credits and you get their sinful reactions. So one devotee heard some devotee criticizing. He said, this devotee is merciful. He's giving the person he's criticizing all his pious credits and taking his sinful reactions. Very kind Vaishnava.
I'm just remembering that this principle is there in Srila Prabhupada's explanation of the invocation of Ishupanishad, that all forms of incompleteness are experienced due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. So actually, everything's there, perfection is there, Krishna's perfect arrangement is there, but by our incompleteness, we can't perceive it. So this is the same principle in a more philosophical way.
We have a special treat for you. First, before the treat, anyone have any questions or comments? Yes?
Something that's generally the way we brought up, we don't want to really follow any. We really truly don't want authority. So, for example, it was on my mind, it just happened that I have to ask it. In the line of authority, like Guru or some authority, that you may have to point out some defects or problems or faults in others. But how do we know if that person really accepts us as authority? Is it that it is something that is like what you may say, rubber stamp, or it's a voluntary something that, because I may think, well, I'm the temple president for this temple and I have to straighten out everybody here, but how do I know that everybody here accepts me like that? And as a result, if some person will not accept me like that, and I think I'm their authority, and I may correct them, but then they will take up offense. And then I may have to live with so much time forgiving people. So how do we see that? How do we do it?
I think it's a really good point that it's a volunteer movement. So there is a line between... It's not just, okay, you move in the temple, this is how it is. I'm the authority, you do what I say, if you don't like it, there's the door. That was ISKCON 1975, basically. As we say, my way or the highway. Prabhupada gave a lot of authority to temple presidents, but because they were young, a lot of them were not able to handle it maturely in a balanced way. And Prabhupada always said, he said, you should understand it's a volunteer movement. So we always have to have that sense of... So Prabhupada said, as a leader, one of the things you want to do is inspire them to follow, not just because you said it, but because they want to. And as a good leader, you find services that are inspiring for them. And another really important factor is you show concern and care for them. Because if you just want them to do what you want them to do and you don't take care of them and show affection, not just in words but actions, then you may run into that situation. Well, they'll say, why should I do what you say? Just because you're the temple president. Because the relationship is not developed. So that's a very important. caring for the devotees under you, showing that you care, seeing them like your brothers or sisters or children. Yes?
I'm thinking more in the line of not just engaging people, but correcting.
Okay, correcting, yeah. I think it applies. I think the same thing applies.
We can see from Srila Prabhupada's own example, just like, about maybe 6 months, maybe a little more before he left, one lady disciple was doing something or saying something, and Srila Prabhupada, raised his voice, shouted at her, "Don't do that." And she became a little morose. So Srila Prabhupada called her in later on and said, "You have to understand, I'm an old man. Sometimes old men get grouchy." So the point is that even Srila Prabhupada in his exalted position was always seeing himself as a humble Vaishnava. So if that reflection is there, then, if a devotee doesn't respond, then it is their fault. But then we have to be introspective enough and analytical of our own actions and always be careful to keep a humble mood, because being a leader especially is very difficult. In a volunteer movement, in a spiritual movement, when you pay people, it's very easy. And even then they have seminars, nowadays, right? Training sessions, how to treat how to be an executive, how to treat the workers, how to treat the public. So, and what to speak of in a voluntary spiritual movement. So, I would say, if a devotee is reflective enough, following Srila Prabhupada's example, then, you may have to ask forgiveness at some point.
There's another side to that also, that sometimes I see you may probably try to be humble or exhibit some kind of humility in dealing with a situation, and then others, there's another group of devotees here say that he's no good on authority and we cannot handle it, and that cause some criticism also.
Yeah, those are the challenges that make us more Krishna conscious.
I think also, the more we become Krishna conscious, the less we'll have those problems. Because we can't fake our Krishna consciousness, but if it's genuine, people will see it. And they may try to wiggle their way out of working with you. But ultimately, there's a saying, how does this go? He said something really nice. He said, if people are talking bad about you, don't act in a way that anyone would believe it. Isn't that nice? People are talking bad about you, don't act in a way that anyone would believe it. So, if we are doing our best to sincerely serve Krishna and set a good example, then, it's not going to, people may criticize you, but other people, it won't make sense to them. So I think that's important. I believe in some cases, there are some devotees that the best thing you can do is be heavy with them, because they won't listen unless you're heavy. I've had this personal experience. Some devotees would not listen to me, and things got to a point, and I said, Prabhu, I've spoken to you about this problem very nicely. You have not followed. Now, there's only one thing I have left to say. You do this, this, and this, or you pack your bags and leave. From that day, I had no problem with that devotee. So with some people, that's what they respond to. And he came later and said, I was very happy that you did that. So sometimes that's necessary. We also have standards within our temple and ashram, and I think it's extremely important that people who join the ashram know what the standard is in terms of the authority and the discipline. So they don't find out later, or we don't allow people in who are setting a bad example, as we said, for the good people. So that's would solve a lot of your problems. If you have a standard, and then you, if a person is not following that standard, let's say they've been there a month, and you can call them in and say, I don't feel you're following the standard, or you understand it, this is what's required. We'd love to have you stay, but if you want to stay, this is what is needed. And you're very nice about it. But so rather than it being just you and them, it's them and the standard, and you're just, you're like a judge, you're impartial. Just say, this is the standard, I don't see you following it.
Just one clarification there. We were taught many times that rules, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, rules or regulation will come later. Just get them to chant Hare Krishna now. So I see in our movement, pretty much we would have just attract people like that. We never tell them all the etiquette, all the standard, all the guidelines and like that. And as a result, by the time probably reach there or get there, to tell them they already,
But it's but when they actually move in the temple, accept service or responsibility, then you see, my experience is whatever standard you set in the temple, most people will follow it. But if you set it here, most people won't go up here. But if you set it up here, most people will come up there. Because that's just the standard, that's all they know. I was telling Maharaj this morning, I said, when I was a young devotee, I was transferred to the San Francisco temple. The San Francisco temple was a storefront about a third of the size of this. It was 2 stories, but about a third of the size of this temple at the most. Maybe even a quarter the size. And the program was Harinam Sankirtan like 12 hours a day. Just insane, out there. And nobody slept more than 5 hours. It's just the schedule was such that 5 hours is just what we slept. And some devotees slept 4. And we went out all day in Harinam and went out all evening. And that was just the standard. So, because everybody did it, everybody did it. We didn't have clothes. We didn't own clothes. We just would get our clothes, they'd be washed, and we'd pick some clothes out of the laundry basket. But there was no clothes on our shelf. But that was the standard, so we accepted it. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm not saying you should only sleep 5 hours. But my experience is that devotees will tend to sink to the lowest possible standard they can get away with. A lot of devotees will. Whereas if you raise the standard, if they're nice devotees, they'll naturally come to it. So, in temples where it's strict, the devotees need to rise by 4, they do it. What's not so strict, some do, some don't. So, from a managerial perspective, my experience is people should be clear about what's expected of them before, and then you can discuss how they'll be able to and not do it, and then you're only just monitoring it at that point. This is what we agreed on, this is what we discussed. I see some slack in this department, can we talk about it? Then at that point they get offended, maybe those aren't the people you want living in the temple. Because you can also create a standard of a certain level of cooperation that's required for living in a temple. As long as people know it, most of them will be able to do it. But the problem is when they don't know it, and then you tell them, and then they're going to say, well, everyone else is also not doing that. Then you have a problem on your hands.
In that way we can avoid the resentment and the need
Yeah.
we always have to beg for everything.
Because it's not about you. It's just rules. You're just the monitor of the rules. And you get them to agree on the rules. I would get them to sign a paper. These are the rules of the ashram. Do you agree? And so there's a problem. I say, Prabhu, you signed. You agreed. We need you to do this. We used to have a guest program in San Diego. We tell them you can stay 3 days in the temple. We have a room for you. And then we'll see how you like the program. So after 3 days, this one man, we said, okay, thank you for coming. He said, I'm not leaving. But we had no paper that said you could only stay for 3 days. So he was like going to the police. They're kicking me out of my room. I have no place to live, it was a whole thing. So, it's nice to get it in writing. Okay. Anything else on this? Yes.
Yeah.
Well, who? I didn't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry. Rajarshi?
I think you pretty much covered it, but I'll just say what I had in mind.
Okay.
His question, he was saying, well, I am thinking I'm the authority, but what if they don't accept me as the authority? But that got clarified when you explained about the system. However, there's a different, if it is not institutionalized, then as Gauri Shabbadev said, that you shouldn't instruct those who are not your disciples and not your son. So, but it's not a voluntary thing when it's an institution. Prabhupada said if there's no discipline, how can you manage anything? So your point about implementing standard sort of covered. It's not a matter whether you accept me as your authority or not. It's an institutionalized.
Yeah.
It's something
And his job is just to maintain the standard. And it's not a problem if you can't follow the standard, because you can live outside. Or you can live, like in Gainesville, next to Alachua, they have a temple at the university. Next to it, they have a house. And they've adjusted the program at the house. So their program starts, 5:30 in the morning. It doesn't start at 4. Students have to study and stay up late. So all these students are going to school, but they're attending a program. So they adjusted for those students. So that's all. Some places do that. They make an adjustment for people who can't follow, who aren't Brahmins, but they want to serve. So then less is expected of them. Yes.
I think also that you cannot lead people without training them.
You cannot
lead them
without training.
So it's important that training is there.
Right. You can't expect things if you don't train them. Yes, I think that goes with the standards, and then train them to follow the standards. It's a very good point. A lot of times in ISKCON, people are given jobs without training, projects without funding, and they're expected to succeed. Right? Thank you. So, I want to read a poem to you. And this poem is about what we've been talking about the tendency to see the faults of others and be focused on that. It's a poem. I think you'll enjoy this poem. The title of this poem is I Was Shocked. I was shocked, confused, bewildered as I entered Goloka's door. Not by the beauty of it all, nor the light or its decor, but it was the devotees in Goloka that I was amazed to see. I knew all of them on earth, but they had so little bhakti. There stood my Sankirtan leader, the one who stole Krishna's money twice. Next to him was my old TP, who was never ever nice. Krishna Das, who never preached, who seemed so insincere, was sitting ecstatically with Krishna, to whom he seemed so dear. I asked my Guru, what's going on? Of this, I don't know what to make. How'd all these devotees end up here? Did someone make a mistake? And why is everyone so quiet, so somber? Give me a clue. Quiet, Prabhu, he said. they're all in shock. No one thought they'd ever be seeing you. That's the epitome of fault finding, isn't it? You like that poem? It was a Christian poem and I adapted it to Krishna conscious. So, we're going to do a little exercise. We have 25 minutes.
Is it possible? I have heard on a lecture about the saintly man, the sadhu, and the unchaste woman who live opposite each other. Can you?
Oh, you know the story? Or the prostitute and the son? You know the story? The prostitute's always...
The prostitute and the saintly one.
She's always feeling, oh, Krishna, I'm so bad. And the sadhu's always... Why don't you tell the story? You probably know it better than I do.
This saintly man...
Wait, come here. So, this is the man behind the camera, folks. Dattavara, the one and only. Let's give him a big hand. He's going to tell the story. Hare Krishna.
This saintly man, the sadhu, was living on the opposite side of this prostitute. So, what is the duty of the saintly man or the sadhu? He always doing puja. He is always praying. And what is the prostitute doing? Prostitute is doing what she do best. But every time a car pulled up there, despite the sadhu man was doing his satsang, he knew which car came. He say another one. He know which car come and which one will go, and when the next one come, he also know. He see another Rolls Royce pull up. So while this prostitute was engaging in her business or duty to earn her livelihood, and the sadhu was doing his satsang, despite she was doing this, she was meditating on what prayer. Oh, this saintly man is praying, so maybe I should pray, despite she was doing what she do. And what the sadhu man was doing? He was meditating on what she was doing. And soon, two of them came and they died. So the sadhu ended up in hell, and the prostitute went to heaven. So Saint Peter, the sadhu meets Saint Peter. He said, I have been praying all my life, and where I end up? In hell? And the prostitute, who was prostituting all her life, you send her to heaven? What injustice is this? But I guess you understand the moral of the story. Mind your own business. Hare Krishna.
And aside from that, she was always thinking, I'm so bad. I'm a prostitute. Oh Krishna, I'm so bad. Save me, oh Krishna. Like the story of the two monks who and one of the monks picks up the lady.
Yeah.
She's trying to get across the river. You know this story? You've all heard this story?
I heard it.
Most of you heard the story. The two monks. I think it's actually a Buddhist story. Somehow it made it into ISKCON. It made it big in ISKCON, this Buddhist story. So I read it. I just read the story in, where did I read it? I read it in a book on forgiveness. And it seems very Buddhist. So this is how they told it. They said, rainy season, same problem. The two monks are going through the water and they see a woman. And she's trying to get through the water. She's very beautiful. Young, slender, attractive, big lips, thin waist. Okay, that's enough. So, lotus eyes. And the vow of a Buddhist monk is never to touch a snake?
Woman.
No, woman. Never to touch a woman. So he sees her struggling, he goes, picks her up and puts her on his back. Whoa. Whoa. I mean, one thing, you take her by the hand. She was on his back. This other monk, he's boiling over. They cut across the river. He puts her down. They walk. For 2 hours, the other monk is laying into the monk. How could you do that? You broke your vows. Not some 90-year-old widow. This is a young, attractive girl. You must have something. You must be after her. I'm going to tell the head monk. 2 hours like that. So what did he say after 2 hours? What did he tell him?
I carried her for 5 minutes and you carried her
For 2 hours.
I carried her for 5 minutes and put her down. You've been carrying her for 2 hours. And you won't put her down. So, it just shows us the irony of fault finding, isn't it? Now, I want to tell you an interesting story. You remember my story, how I was saying I was really upset when this guru sannyasi left. I didn't realize this, but after teaching this seminar many times, something came to me very interesting. In 1981, I kind of had a fallout with this guru sannyasi because he was preaching things that I didn't agree with, and they were so against what I believed we should be doing. It hit a critical point where I could no longer work with him. And I had been working with him for many, many years, very closely, in his zone. Basically, that was, up until this point, that was where I spent most of my time, in that zone. And one fine day, I contacted a friend in South Africa and arranged to leave and just go. And I said, I'm leaving, bye-bye. What I didn't realize is what he did to me 5 years before I did to him. I just walked out on him and said, I'm going. That's it. No conversation, anything. And I was so upset for what he did to me, and it took me years to realize I did the same thing to him, and I wasn't even aware of it. So a lot of times, when we have an issue with another person, we never ask the question, what did I have to do with this? Did I have anything to do with how this person behaved? Or have I in any way behaved that way? It's a good question to ask, isn't it?
Yeah.
You want to hear another good question? How would you be doing today if you were only forgiven to the degree that you have forgiven others? How would you be doing if you, for all the things you've done wrong, you were only forgiven as much as you have forgiven other people?
I will not feel good.
Not too good. Some of us would not be doing too good. Maybe all of us would be doing pretty bad. Possibly. Here's another one. You want another one?
Haribo.
Can you handle another one? This is very interesting. When you take revenge towards another person, what do you want to do? You want to punish them. And you would like to see them get what they deserve. Correct?
Yes.
When you hurt somebody, what do you want? Mercy, right? Please forgive me, I didn't mean it. Isn't it? We want justice for others. Punish him, he did wrong. And for ourselves, we want mercy. Oh, please forgive me, I didn't mean it. Is that a paradox? I want justice, but for you. I want mercy, but for you, I want justice. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so let's do one exercise before we finish. This is the exercise, it's in your book. The first question is, what actions do you find intolerable in your offender? Write down. You see it's exercise 9. 10. 10. Oh my God. What's exercise 9? I don't have exercise. Oh! I may have changed the order and you didn't change it on yours. Okay. Let's do this exercise, then we'll do the belief one tomorrow. Okay, so what I want you to first do is write down in your book what actions you find intolerable in your offender. Okay? And then after you do that, not now, but after you do that, go back to this worksheet and then answer the next question. Okay? But just answer this first question first. What actions do you find intolerable in your offender? And then read the second question after you write down what you find intolerable. Okay? Oh my God, I completely missed it. The second question is just a yes or no answer. People out there don't have this worksheet, so they don't even know what the question is. Okay. How many of you are still on the first question? Only one? Okay, so I'll read you the second question. First question is, what actions do you find intolerable in your offender? Usually it's something he did to betray you, to harm you, to hurt you, something like that. Is it possible that sometimes what you find unforgivable in others are qualities you reject in yourself? Or your offender reminds you of other unforgivable qualities in yourself? Yes or no? Did anybody write no for this? How many wrote no? 2? Anybody else write? Everyone else wrote yes? What do you find intolerable in your offender? Is it possible that sometimes you find unforgivable in others qualities you reject in yourself? Or the qualities you reject in yourself are qualities you are afraid to admit it about yourself, that you may be doing the same thing that he does. But by the law of averages, it's highly unlikely that we don't do what our offender does sometimes. Of course, the offender may be a murderer or something, but there may be, the offender may do something horrible, but within that we see that there was a quality or trait that maybe we have, such as lack of respect, being insensitive or something of that. It could be anything. Not exactly what he did, but it could show insensitivity, it could show harshness. So the answer should be, of course, yes, what we find in our offender is also something we may find in ourselves that we dislike. And again, it's an acknowledgement that it's not all out there, it's in there. Morris, you want to say anything? You want to say any more about finding fault in ourselves or others, or changing? We're trying to change our paradigm so that you don't always blame the other person, but you take responsibility and see you also may be like that, or you may not be perfect. Anybody here perfect? Almost, right? Yeah, too humble to say you're perfect. Yeah. Okay. Why don't you say some closing words for us?
Actually, as Mahatma says, we're transitioning into a very important point and concept, which is compassion. And I think that will be one of the themes for tomorrow. But to be compassionate, of course, we can tell some different stories and pastimes out to illustrate. And we did, the other night, Sridhani Prabhu last night asked about compassion, so we gave some examples, Sri Haridas Thakur. But one of the basic principles, which you can all maybe think about a little bit tonight and tomorrow morning, not when you're chanting japa, but meditate on it a little bit. And the very important principle, which I mentioned the first day very briefly, which is Mungjana evat makritam vipakam, that I have to understand that I am the author, I am the cause of everything that's happening to me. And one very beautiful purport in Bhagavad Gita, in the second chapter, 56th verse, where Krishna says that one should not be disturbed by the miseries in life, one should not be elated by the happiness in life, and one should learn to conquer Vita Ragabhaya Krodha, learn to all types of attachments, fears and anger. That way one can actually become a devotee. So, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says something very beautiful, and it's very easy to understand. This has a lot, we can reflect on beliefs. We can understand it theoretically, philosophically, but to live it is a very, very difficult thing. I find in myself and observing others also, which is that whenever something very bad happens to me, then I should feel very, very fortunate that Krishna just gave me a tiny little, I mentioned this briefly yesterday with Sri Haridas Thakur. He just gave me a tiny little fraction of it. How much is that fraction? Just enough to make me understand that this material world is not my home. That my real duty, my real activity is to serve Krishna, to please Krishna. Just that much Krishna is giving me, that much difficulty. Of course, now some people think, well, it's not fair. Like, I have 25 different types of difficulties every day, and I see other devotees, they got, immediately got married to a nice, wealthy man or woman, and they have a nice house, and they have and I've been struggling all my life. But it's not a relative thing, because it's coming from us. And then, so one should be very happy to receive that, because this will help me come closer to Krishna, as Queen Kunti said, that the darshan, or seeing the miseries and the difficulties in this material world again and again, make me understand the nature of this world, and thus I can come closer to Krishna. And then when we have a nice material situation, we think, I don't deserve this. This is simply Krishna's mercy, so that I can engage more actively, more enthusiastically, have more facility to serve Him. So therefore, as Srila Prabhupada said, I have to use every farthing in His service, not waste one farthing, one penny. So the point is that this very simple truth, actually when Pariksha Maharaj was speaking with Dharma in the form of a bull, then he said that. He said, why are you suffering why are you being subjected to this suffering? It's totally unfair. And the bull didn't say, you're right. We're in synergy. We're synchronized here. No, he said. Well, he went through actually all of the different philosophies that are given. Well, it could be karma mimamsa. It could be the theory of nature everything is happening by the arrangement of nature and karma, and he went through all kinds of different philosophies. He said, but actually what I understand, it's all due to Paramatma. It's all due to destiny. It's actually what I deserve. Therefore, I'm not disturbed, but I'm actually very happy that I'm getting the opportunity to put these obstacles behind me. So this is a very important principle that, we can speak about more tomorrow. I just wanted to leave you with that. We didn't plan it, but it happened that way. As a thought, because I always encourage devotees to meditate on this point again and again and again, because that way you won't blame anybody else. Blaming, which turns into, lack of forgiveness, which turns into vengeance, all these nasty things that we've been speaking about, they all have their root in not understanding and accepting and living our lives according to this very essential point in Vaishnavism. And without it, you can't avoid conflict, you can't avoid problems, you can't avoid disturbances in your life. And when you live like that, you're always happy, you're always peaceful in any situation, in any condition. And we see that so many great devotees, when difficulties happen, that's what they say. In all the prayers, to any devotee who's in some difficult circumstance, when he prays to the Lord, that's what he says. This is simply my karma, this is my doing, this is my destiny. And they're very happy. But if we think, no, somebody did this, it's because of this, circumstances, the three miseries are being imposed upon me by some external person or source, then life is very difficult. So anyway, those are some thoughts, and we can meditate on those a little bit tonight. Hare Krishna.
You ever heard the saying, a bad workman blames his tools?
The devil made me do it.
Yes.
You don't have to answer this one today, but I just wanted to maybe deliberate on it and maybe you can answer later. The topic and the points we are speaking about, if it makes a difference if you say living in an institution in the ashram as opposed to someone as just a devotee living somewhere, if the things that we are practicing, if you can think about that, if you're part of a structure, an institution, are these principles the same or do they make differences?
I think they're more necessary, but I think they're also necessary in the family. But they're extremely necessary within an institution for it to function well at an optimum level.
One thing that Srila Prabhupada said in 1968 was, he was speaking to the devotees, and he said, everyone must chant 16 rounds. And Prabhupada said, especially grihasthas, it is essential for them. So, although it may be, very important and more structured if one is living in an ashram or maybe lives right next to the temple or something, has a lot of service, but, there is to be a responsible and progressive Vaishnava, everybody, has to accept the parameters that help them to advance in devotional service. We can't just, say, well, I'm outside and I got to do this and I got to do that. Even Priyabrata, who was in charge of the universe, he never forgot his Krishna consciousness, and he was always aware of it. And what to speak of Ambarish Maharaj, who we spoke about the other day, he was a king, he was an emperor, but he was so absorbed in devotional service that he had his ministers just even doing jagyas, which were actually activities, spiritual activities. He had them doing that so he could just meditate on Krishna. So it doesn't matter what our circumstances, we have to, along with our spiritual master and the Vaishnavas, establish the parameters for our spiritual advancement.
So we're going to end tonight, and we're going to do something special. So everyone pay attention. Each one of you is going to offer your blessings to another devotee. Not to another devotee, to every devotee. Every man will offer his blessings to every man, and every woman will offer their blessings to another woman. And they're going to bless them. Number one, they get here on time tomorrow. So you can't give that blessing unless you're sure you're going to get on time. And bless them to have success in opening their heart more, to become more forgiving, to become free from jealousy and envy. And how you bless them? You'll give them a big hug. And while you're hugging and squeezing them, you'll offer your blessings. Okay? So that means every man is going to give a hug and a blessing to every man. And every woman's going to give a hug and a blessing to every woman. Even the men you don't like and even the women you don't like. Don't avoid anybody. Okay? Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.